I remember phoning my son actually and saying, oh, I can't make up my mind whether it'd be best to disassociate or get disfellowshipped. And he said he was crying because he was so overjoyed.
People that were talking to us and knew that we'd woken up to, oh, that's great, you know, you can go to university, you can do all the things that you wanted to do that you haven't been able to do. And it's, well, hang on a minute, you know, I'm 70. To say, oh, I could never talk to my parents or I couldn't talk to my grandparents because they're too entrenched, they're too old. I don't think anybody's too old to gain freedom.
Virus and COVID is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
A large percentage of you watching this video will have likely been indoctrinated as children into Jehovah's Witnesses. Then at some point in your life, something may have sparked some curiosity. You will have woken up from the religion and left, maybe in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and maybe some of you even in your 60s. I'm now 29. I woke up in my mid-20s, with most of my life hopefully still ahead of me. But that is not the same for this couple. In fact, at my age now, 29, Mike, welcome to The Truth Hurts, and you, Anne, thank you for being on the show. Mike, at 29, you became a Jehovah's Witness, and along with your wife, Anne, you took your 3 children into the religion. You spent 43 years as Jehovah's Witnesses, and recently, in your early 70s, you left the religion. Quite the story. When I received your message on Instagram, there were so many questions. I thought, this story needs to be told. This is incredible. So perhaps the first question I can ask you, Mike, is what made you get in touch with me out of nowhere on Instagram? Why did you want to have this conversation put on the internet?
Basically, after leaving and discussing with people reasons for leaving, different people were very surprised at our age when we came out. And on talking to younger ones who had got parents in, it was very common for people to say, oh, I don't think I could see my mum and dad coming out. They're too old, they're too indoctrinated. And it was quite common to hear this comment. And I felt that there's another generation there that could be doubting what they're doing, but they're not getting the chance to learn, if you like, the truth about the truth.
That's very interesting, because in the past, I've even said in my content that I tried to wake up my dad, who at the time was in his 50s, early 50s, but my grandparents, who were in their 70s, I didn't actually want to wake them up. And when I went over and explained my story to them, I kind of said, well, Noah's Ark, dinosaurs, this. I touched, but I didn't go into any depth because I feared the consequences of what would happen if they did wake up. The thing that stood out to me the most when you first got in touch, you basically said, I wouldn't change this for anything. I would wish everyone could wake up, you know? And then we got into this interchange about whether it would be practical if everyone woke up, whether everyone can handle it. Now, one thing I haven't said to you, Mike, is that last week on Twitter, I put a poll out. I asked people, if you had the power to wake up your Jehovah's Witness relatives aged 70 plus, would you? How do you think 198 people voted? Yes or no?
I would think the majority voted no.
After the first few seconds, the first few voted no, and I thought, well, this is just going to be everyone no. Turns out 55% of people voted yes.
Wow.
Which is quite surprising, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there is definitely this kind of feeling of, regardless of how they're going to respond, I want them to come to know the truth about the truth before it's too late. So let's get into your life story more. Before we deal with the hard-hitting questions of how you view life after waking up in your 70s, is the glass half full, glass half empty, let's deal with your life in the religion, that first chapter. Because neither of you were indoctrinated and brainwashed at a young age into being Jehovah's Witnesses. This is something that you took into in your 20s. Mike, late 20s, you probably your mid-20s. What was it that attracted you to the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses?
I was surprised that Mick had got interested because he wasn't a religious person. I had been brought up a Catholic, although I had stopped going to church, but I always believed in God. And I was very sceptical, very on edge really, that Mick was suddenly looking into the Bible and finding it so thrilling. And I wanted him to stop. And when he was so determined, eventually I said, okay, if you want to look into it, I'll come to a meeting with you, and when I've proved it wrong, will you stop going? So I actually went to actually prove it wrong.
That's incredibly similar to my great-grandparents, Ken and Eunice, from up north near Manchester. They moved to the Midlands, and Eunice was looking for the truth. And Ken said, well, you ain't going to find it. Just sit here and read your Bible. Eunice said, come with me to one meeting, and if you can disprove it, I'll never go again. And obviously, because the organisation does use the Bible as a basis for its teachings, or at least claims to, and it's very persuasive in doing so. So from going to that meeting, did you ever look back, or did you know at that point you had something special?
Our first meeting was Christmas Eve. So the three children, we said, don't mention Christmas because they don't celebrate it. And the talk was all about atonement, which was really deep, but certain things in the talk reminded me of things I'd heard being brought up as a Catholic. So I understood bits of it, whereas Mick didn't, really take to it at all. And we also then we were invited to another meeting where they did a slideshow in a different area, and we went to that, and that was really interesting. And then the brother in our local hall said, why don't you come to the group in a home? So we did that. I think Mick said to me, it was the booklet, Is There a God Who Cares? It was just 4 weeks. Mick said, what's 4 hours of our life? Shall we go?
And 4 hours turned into 43 years.
Yeah, yes, exactly, yeah.
That's how it works. Now, you joined the religion, was it after 1975? But there were still permutations of the end times around that time. Stories you were saying to me of people selling their house. What sort of financial impact on both of your life has being a Jehovah's Witness had, and these constant Armageddon is coming narrative?
That had quite a big effect, because going back, I would say no more than a year after we came in, we started to get advice that, and it was put in such a way, if you really believe this, you're not going to need a pension. Why are you going to need a pension? It's going to all be over by, the time you get to retiring age. And those of you that are paying into pensions and insurances, it will be much better to use those, that monetary income that you have, and provide it for the sake of the worldwide work. And because you're so wrapped up in it and believed it, we sadly did that, or I did that. And I genuinely thought, I'm never going to need a pension.
And you are the living proof, aren't you, of how this organisation's policies have really affected your
Absolutely.
life? Because you sit here now after retirement age, and your life would be very different if you hadn't had this agenda thrust upon you for 43 years of give us your money. You don't need much in life. You don't need anything. You're not going to grow old. You're not going to die in this system of things.
Yeah.
You were a part of 12 congregations.
That's right.
Why was it you were a part of so many congregations? Because many people like me, in it for many years, 2 congregations based on where I lived, 12. Did you ever truly settle in this organisation, Mike?
To be perfectly honest, I don't think I did, even though we were in 40 years. My view of the organisation at that time was we're there to help one another. And the impression you get is the only way that a male can really help is to progress, become a ministerial servant, and eventually an elder. And I always had that in mind, because that was the way to help people. but it became very evident that basically I didn't fit the format of being a servant. I didn't agree with a lot of things, and I would sort of make this known, which didn't go well. So there was also the other side of it. Jobs moved us around as well. I was in engineering at the time, and different job opportunities came up which did involve us moving, but it did help us to see the difference there are in congregations, because some are easier, easier going bodies of elders maybe. Others are stringent, rule the roost, talk down to you, and all sorts of very, very different, although supposedly all fighting for the same cause.
Yeah. And there's an established hierarchy. When you enter a congregation, there is a hierarchy already in place. And if you go in and impose yourself in any way, they will make sure they'll knock you down into your position. And that's quite shocking, because you feel like this organisation warmly welcomes people. It's meant to be loving. And yet, I think in a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses' lives, they've been the recipient of gross injustice and mistreatment of those who were supposed to be caring for the congregation. I remember, Anne, you were saying yesterday about how shocking the behaviour was of one elder who singled Mike out on a regular occasion, and you had enough of it at some point. Can you just relate that experience?
This elder and his family actually fell over themselves to welcome us into the congregation. And we had been warned by another family who had been in that congregation, oh, it's a really hard congregation. But we moved in, determined that, well, we would help and work along and fit in and everything. And after several weeks, Mick made a comment to this elder in jest, which he didn't like, because Mick said, perhaps when you aren't service overseer anymore, which the elder said he hated the job, and Mick said, well, perhaps I can work and I could end up as service overseer. And from that moment on, this brother obviously thought Mick was a threat, and he changed overnight towards us. Consequently, at meetings for ministry, he would embarrassingly sort of put Mick to one side, and at the time Mick was pioneering, and he would say, well, us pioneers are going to this territory, and what are you going to do, Mike? And week after week it just wears you down, and you want to stand up for your husband and you want to say something, but really you're a wife, so you keep your voice down.
Exactly,
and keep your mouth shut. So that was really hard to accept, and you could see the sort of change overnight in this brother towards us. So there's a lot of politics behind it all.
It's all politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved back into a congregation I was in, a brother clearly didn't like me. I would put my hand up about 12 times in a Watchtower study, and he wouldn't pick me because he was the Watchtower overseer. And although I was already questioning things before that point, that definitely made me realise that Jehovah isn't behind this. He can't be in charge of selecting elders and then maintaining them in their positions, because this guy would have been gone a long time ago. So I think it did it sped up the process of my awakening for sure. But speaking of things which led to a waking up process, injustice, I know we were talking about this yesterday, Mike. People fall into two camps. Either there is a torrent of things, of doubts that have persisted for some years, that have been extremely suppressed. What I say is they put into the back of their mind, label it do not enter, and then tape it up and lock it up and put a padlock on it, because the thought of opening that box is too dangerous. Or out of nowhere, perhaps very innocently, they search for something, and unintentionally it leads to their waking up, just something out of nowhere. What was the story with you guys? Who woke up first? And was it the suppression of doubts eventually just couldn't be held back anymore? Or was it something you searched for?
I woke up first, but only by about a week or so, no longer. It involves my wife's sister, actually. My two sons were no longer witnesses, and they used to go and see their auntie, and they'd spent some time together. And after they'd visited their auntie, we made a subsequent visit. And I always used to ask how they got on with the boys, because their auntie, and they like to see their auntie. Anne's sister said, yeah, we had a lovely time, really had a good time. We had some really nice discussions. And she said, actually, we had a really good discussion about the witness organisation. I said, oh, that's good. I said, it's nice for you to expand your knowledge. She said, in particular, she said, it was about the child abuse. And I immediately think, well, I don't think so, Lynn. You know, yes, it goes on in all organisations, we know that. But I can't actually see there's any issue. So I didn't go into it in depth. I didn't want to cause an argument on a nice, peaceful weekend with them. So I just let it go. And we came back home. And that subsequent week, I'm thinking, I've known Lynn for 56 years, something like that. And we had our differences of opinion, but we'd never fallen out. And she'd never blatantly lied to me or anything like that. And I thought, because of my years I'd known Lynn, I really owed it to her and to myself to find out about this accusation of the child abuse. It did have a personal thing as well. When I was a child, I spent time in a convalescent home after major heart surgery, and I was actually abused in that home. So it was nothing to do with the witnesses. Obviously, it was just a convalescent home, and that had a very deep effect on my life, and it brought back memories of that time. And as I'm looking into the situation with the witnesses and child abuse, it brought back all my memories, and I'm just thinking, if this is all true, how can a loving God actually choose this organisation to represent him on earth? And B, how can I support such an organisation? And basically, it was almost an overnight for me.
It was the Australian Royal Commission, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
That's worth pointing out, because I feel like a lot of people, that was a real turning point for them.
Definitely.
Is being aware of the scale.
Yeah.
Because you exist in your own bubble, and normally, obviously, if you're not an elder, you're probably not even aware of
That's
it. Because
right.
why would you be made aware of it? They don't want to advertise that.
Yeah.
So it's all dealt inwardly, in-house, so that the rank and file don't know.
Right.
And if the rank and file know, it happens in every organisation. And he says he woke up a week before you. Now that's quite remarkable odds. If you think 43 years inside this organisation, within a week you wake up. Was that just coincidence, or was there something about the conversation that Mike had with your sister that also helped to wake you up, or not?
Well, yes, I mean, it definitely had an effect. I think personally I'd been waking up probably for quite a while, but as you said earlier, you suppressed doubts. There was lots of things happening, things were changing, and I was thinking, this isn't the religion that we joined. I'd got to the stage where I think I didn't always trust the elders, because we'd been in so many congregations. You kind of see a pattern, and often the ones that you think you're really going to be friendly with turn out actually that's not the case. So I think particularly when they changed the thinking on the generation, that, you know, that just did not make sense to me at all.
But that was the teaching, wasn't
Yes,
it? That was what the whole of Millions Now Living Will Never Die
Yes.
was based on, is 1914, the generation. And then you change it to this very complicated, overlapping generation. And then, as we know, once you develop critical thinking skills, it's a case of, well, can't an overlapping generation overlap again? Can't they just use this forever? I didn't know that about the generation. That was a key one for you.
Yes, it stuck in my mind, and I thought, this does not seem right. I think a couple of years later, we had the letter about when they were sort of taking all the deeds back of the Kingdom Halls. Then we had a special meeting on a Saturday, 2-hour special meeting on a Saturday, teaching us how to look after the Kingdom Hall. And I mean, there was a lot of us there. Mick didn't go. And when I got home, I said, I'm so glad you didn't go. It was just laughable. They were teaching sisters how to empty the Hoover bags at the hall, and, you know, how not to make marks all around the Kingdom Hall. And if we cleaned the moss off the roof of the Kingdom Hall, it would last 10 years longer. And I thought, what's this got to do with Armageddon coming and things like that? So it was lots of little things that were just niggling.
At the outset, I kind of said there's these two different ways people wake up, and right here you have two very different ways. One, as you say, a volcano, a sudden eruption, Mike, and then the build-up for you, and then finally the culmination of both of you waking up together. And so now we have you both in your 70s, at least 70 years old, with you've been making the stance in your life of shunning children largely. Your daughter at this point is still in, and all your friends, your whole life is this organisation, and you're having conversations with people. And as we know, there's 3 options. You either get disfellowshipped for apostasy, you hand in a letter of disassociation, or you try and fade, where you just stop going as much, and then hopefully the elders don't chase you down the street. What decision did you make, and why?
I remember phoning my son actually and saying, oh, I can't make up my mind whether it'd be best to disassociate or get disfellowshipped. And he said he was crying because he was so overjoyed that I'd come to that realisation. But I was scared of being disfellowshipped or disassociating, because then I thought, then my daughter can't talk to me, and she won't. And we'd been incredibly close for years, and even when she was disfellowshipped, we helped her, and I didn't want to put her in that position. But then I thought, but actually, if I do that, I'm just playing by their rules. So I wanted to just fade, but I was scared. And well, when we stopped going to meetings, I just wanted to pull the curtains and dreaded a knock on the door from the elders. It really did affect me.
But Mike, you wanted to disassociate, but you were persuaded to just hold fire on that. But you did meet with one elder, and you were telling me what he said yesterday, which was incredible.
I got a phone call from Anne. Anne was actually out on the door work, and I got a phone call. She's saying, brother so-and-so is on his way round to see you. He wants to come and see you. So I sort of got ready, and when he came in, we started talking. And I really opened up how I feel about the society and the organisation and how it was run. And particularly with the child abuse, not reporting it, etc., etc. And to my amazement, everything I said to him, he totally agreed with.
Wow.
Totally agreed with. In fact, one comment he made, we touched on the money, because it's money orientated for definite. And he said, no organisation can make the money they have in this society by being honest.
Wow, okay.
And I said, well, that's my view, that, they're very dishonest. They don't reveal everything, and a lot of the money is very hush-hush. And he totally agreed.
And at the same time as you guys waking up, and I think you decided you were never going to attend a meeting again, that you'd been to your final assembly, you probably shouldn't have even gone, but you just went because you were in the habit of doing so. About 6 weeks after that time, you find out that your son is diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Yeah.
So 43 years of thinking Armageddon's coming, and this is the truth. You're having all this happen around you, a cacophony of pain from all different angles. How difficult was that time period in your life of dealing with the departure of the religion, losing all your friends, being shunned by your daughter, and your son being diagnosed with terminal cancer?
It was very, very difficult because we'd had 43 years of, excuse me, 43 years of don't fear death. You're going to see them again. You're going to be with your loved ones. And then the realisation that our son had got terminal cancer, and now this was it. When he eventually passed away, we're not going to see him again. My view now is we don't know. We just don't know. There may be something, there may be not. But it was very difficult to cope with.
What we should say is that although that's your second child, your youngest son, your eldest son, who I had the pleasure of meeting today, your relationship with him after leaving has been completely enhanced. It's more real than it's ever been.
Absolutely, yeah.
After years and years of just pushing it to the back of your mind that your son's rejected it all, and years of not seeing him very often, and then coming to the stage where Mick was told he'd got to, cancel all association with him or he'd never progress. But then suddenly to see him was amazing. I think both my sons cried because they couldn't believe that we'd come out.
I think Colin summed it up. He said, when I got the phone call from your dad, he said I couldn't actually believe it to start off with. And I started asking him different things because he'd already gone through the process. And he said, I kind of held back. I didn't want to tell you everything. He said, but in the end, he said, I just thought, oh, what the heck? I'll just give it to you as it is. And he was a great help in us coming out. And his phrase was, he said, I got to a point where I just had to throw the petrol on the fire.
And he just kept on trying to plant seeds, didn't he?
Yeah.
And wake you up.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, my dad's an elder, and he's quite a high-ranking elder. He does circuit work, district work. Do you feel like the fact that you didn't have a lot to lose from in terms of a hierarchical position, that you weren't known as this ultra-spiritual Jehovah's Witness, that you were sort of like a questioner, you weren't the easiest person to control, that must have had some sort of impact in terms of how easy it was necessarily to leave?
When we were in our second to last congregation, I thought, right, this is it. I've really got to make a go of this now. And with our eldest son, I just kept in contact probably twice a year, just with an email or a message, just, are you okay? Do you need anything? But I was told I'd have to stop that and have absolutely nothing to do with him at all. Otherwise I wouldn't progress. And I actually had applied to go back onto pioneering at that point, and I was turned down.
Wow.
So yes, it was not having the hierarchy and being part of it. I just don't know. Had I been an elder, I don't know.
And so the last child, your youngest, your daughter, how's the dynamic been since obviously you guys leaving? Because what you have here is quite a unique situation that will be alien to most of the people watching this. Most of the people watching this will be younger, and their older relatives who are Jehovah's Witnesses are still in, and they're being shunned by their older relatives. How is it to be shunned by someone who you helped to brainwash into the religion? Is that really difficult?
It was extremely difficult, and I do still struggle on occasions with, if you like, being the person that introduced them to the truth, taking them all those years. It was just unreal, really. I mean, to end up with a daughter not talking to you and not having anything to do with you, and quite blasely when she rang Anne to say, it was just, well, we've talked about it and we've decided that we can't have any association with you anymore.
Wow.
And that was it.
From shunner to shunned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre turnaround, isn't it? Because when you do the shunning yourself, you don't even really question it. No. It's not like I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna shun them. It's just, I don't even think. This is what happens. They know the rules. But then when you're being shunned, it's hard to not view that as more, malicious and with intent, even though they're just programmed robots.
That's what helps me, is the fact I've got to think and remember, well, that's what you were like when you were under the control. And that's the reason for it. It's not her, it's the control that is put on her. She is actually talking to us now.
Oh, that's good.
We found that she did change when her brother died. It changed her, seemed to change her outlook. And one phrase she's mentioned quite a lot is, life's too short. So we are on a talking and associating.
That's interesting. Life's too short. Yeah. What she means by that is the starter. This temporary existence is too short. Yeah. She's hoping she's going to have a main course, of course, when you guys are struggling to come to the realization that this is all there is. Let's turn our attention to that, because realizing, obviously, the scale of the disparate contrast between the outlook for the future of being a Jehovah's Witness, paradise earth, you can hold your wife's hand in paradise forever in a happy garden, to, wow, this life is all there is. There's not going to be many people at my funeral. Within a generation or two, I will be forgotten, and no one cares. It's extremely painful, and many people simply never get their head around that. As a person in my mid-20s, at least I could think, well, hopefully if I don't get some form of cancer, or if something else doesn't take me within the next few years of my life, hopefully I can reach an old age. But you guys wake up in your early 70s, and while most people are thinking, well, part of my life is already in place, but what am I going to do in future? What do I want to achieve? Do I have any future goals? Your life is very different to that. Do you think to yourself, what is it we want to achieve in future? Or do you live day by day? What is it like for a 70-plus-year-old person to wake up?
Extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. You have to come to you come to the realization, and you become very aware of your mortality. Made even more so when we lost our son. Waking up late in life, you don't have the opportunities of, say, someone who wakes up in their mid-20s. And it's quite funny, because people that were talking to us and knew that we'd woken up, said, oh, that's great, you can go to university, you can do all the things that you wanted to do that you haven't been able to do. And it's, well, hang on a minute, I'm 70. People in their 20s, they can pick a career that they'd like to follow, they can go to university, and they hopefully can, and that's great. I think that's absolutely brilliant for them. But you don't get that option in your 70s. And you have to condition your mind that the time you have left on this earth, you're going to make the best of it. And since I've woken up, I think I've been the happiest I've been most of my life.
Wow, okay.
What I'm so grateful for is freedom. Freedom is the key, I believe, for the reason older people should come out, because they're not free. They're told when to be at a meeting, they're told when to be on the service. And they put this guise on it, but it's their choice. But, we all know that it's put on you as a pressure.
Yeah, and with the older generation, as with yourself with regards to entering the religion, you didn't have two sides presented to you. There was no internet. So you just trusted what they were saying
That's
was
right.
true when you went along for the first time.
That's right.
And so our grandparents, they will have entered this religion probably either being brainwashed by their parents or not having two sides presented. So what you're saying is, if you're willing to acknowledge that once you tell your relatives this information, you will probably be shunned.
Yeah.
If you're willing to risk it all, then why not give it to them and at least present them certain information and not think to yourself, I'm not going to talk to them about this because it could wake them up, because you just don't know how it's going to impact their life. We presume that our relatives won't be able to deal with it if they wake up older, but what you're saying is you're happier than you've ever been before, and that could be your relative too. Perhaps a final question, Anne, let me put this one to you. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty?
It differs from day to day. I try to be positive, but some days it's, what's the point? I try and keep busy. I find for myself, if I keep busy, but I've still got to learn, really, in making the most of the life we've got left. It's to sort of go out and do things and experience, the wonderful place where we live and things like that. On the whole, at the moment we're both reasonably healthy, so we can do things. One thing, Mick said you can't go to university. Well, you can do courses and open university and things like that, but I was never that studious in that way, so I'm more hands-on doing things. But yeah, for me it does vary, but I try to be positive and glass half full.
That's the challenge. The challenge is trying to see the glass as half full when we know it's both half empty and half full at the same time, right? I remember when I spoke to you for the first time, Mike, you were brutally honest. You said the glass is half empty. Why were you so quick to say that?
Probably, to be honest, the question came quick and I probably didn't really sit down and think about it.
So you'd probably say, like Anne, it depends on what mood you're
Exactly, yeah.
in. I think that's just natural, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think even for people my age, you wake up and you will always have this part of your life that you lost. Because we could look at it and say, well, you had your youth outside of the religion.
True.
And I could say, well...
In the glowing 60s.
Yeah, exactly. And my youth was stolen from me by this organisation.
That's right.
So we've all had parts of our life which we will never get back.
That's right.
The challenge is making the most of the now. And I think that's where viewers at home, the biggest lesson from your life is live in the moment, because the moment is all we know we have.
That's right.
And that tomorrow is a mystery.
Yeah.
And we might not be there to live it.
Yeah.
Guys, any last words that you want to say?
Yeah, as regards looking at the older generation, I wouldn't, if I was in that position of having older parents or grandparents, I wouldn't miss the opportunity just to gently talk to older ones, but to say, oh, I could never talk to my parents, or I couldn't talk to my grandparents because they're too entrenched, they're too old. I don't think anybody's too old to gain freedom. I really don't. And it's the freedom that, it's just been wonderful. It really has.
I think a day of freedom is worth 10 years in the organisation, isn't it?
Yeah.
You simply cannot put a price on being able to wake up and think, what am I going to do today? What do I want to do? Not what does the organisation want me to do? Do I feel guilty for doing this because Jehovah's watching me?
Yeah, I can just think back. If Anne's sister hadn't have just said those few words to me, we'd probably still be in. So you never know. Something you might say, you don't have to be sort of forceful or you should do this and you should do that. Just gently talk to them about things that are not quite right, or ask their opinion on it, something like that. I think they deserve a chance. There must be thousands out there, and so yeah, if you get the opportunity, go for it.
I think that's a great point to take home, isn't it? I want to thank you both so much for your hospitality. The viewers aren't going to know this, but our car broke down yesterday on the way down south. And good friends don't just exist within the organisation. You come out and beautiful people offering their hospitality. We stayed here last night. Thank you personally for that. I think viewers are going to thank you for sharing your experiences. And just like I wish everyone, but especially with the time you have left, may you enjoy it and may you continue to enjoy the sweet taste of that freedom.